in that case, I'll make a start. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jean Lambert. I'm currently the Green Party's member of the European Parliament for London, and will be until March 29th, and after that, who knows. However, today is not about me. Today is about exciting events for next year, where we make sure that we keep Greens really on the map in London. And so what we're doing this afternoon is hearing from our 4 candidates for Green Party candidate as Mayor of London. Firstly, I have to say I apologise, we have no microphone in here this afternoon. Apparently the amplifier has blown up, so these things happen, so it's just a question of projection. We are not expecting fire drills or anything like that, so please note the exits should they be needed, and for those that may need a comfort break at some point, out and to the left. So that's the essential information. Let me tell you a little about the format for this afternoon. That what we will be doing is, first of all, inviting each of our 4 candidates to take 5 minutes at the lectern to introduce themselves, tell us about themselves, why they want to take this position on, because of course it's a lot of hard work, and why they think they are going to be the right person to be our mayoral candidate. We will then go to questions from you, and I think some coming in online that Phil will pick up for us. And then we will have, and we'll take those in batches and maybe sort of 3 questions at a time. Each of the candidates will have a chance to answer them, and the tracking going on, I think, about how people take the answers in that roughly. So before we start, I also want to say thank you to those that have organised this afternoon, to Phil for all of the work that he is doing, organising the hustings, the voting itself, and of course to people who are on the door, making sure that we have somewhere to be and somewhere to sit. So our 4 candidates this afternoon, I'm sure you already have been looking at them online, seeing who they are, but Sian Berry, Peter Underwood, Dr. Shara Ali, and Zach Polanski. And that's the order in which they will do their opening addresses. So, Sian, over to you for your 5 minutes to tell us why you are
16. Each time there was a change of mayor and a close battle and a vicious campaign. A high turnout, which is usually terrible for us. So each time a real threat to the Green vote and to our assembly members. But each time I've fought through this to get noticed, fight a serious campaign with real plans for actually being mayor, and I've got through without gaffes and with a real mission and a great team. And each time our vote has gone up, and our vote share too. In 2008 we went from 7th to 4th, and in 2016 we added to our 3rd place lead and got our deposit back for the first time. But I have never had the chance to stand for mayor as a sitting assembly member. That's what helped Jenny make the leap over the Lib Dems in 2012. But I've never had the chance to stand when I know so much about how London works and how to get things done. And I have never had the chance to stand for mayor when there was not a squeeze. This time the Tories are weak, divided, and putting up an assembly member who isn't all that good. Sorry, Sean Bailey and the others, but the Greens are the best opposition, and I've been the shadow mayor, and you should be worried. And finally, I've never, and I can't really say this because we've had great people before and some of them are standing again, but as a group, I've never been so excited about our assembly candidates. They are amazing, and what a team we'll have. So we do have a unique chance in 2020. If you choose me as our candidate, the Greens can break open London politics, like we have in Bavaria and across Germany, where we stamped on the AfD's bigotry with hope, and in Amsterdam, which has a left-green woman as mayor now. We have the right values, the ones that London has, and we can prove from our record under Darren and Jenny, and now with Caroline and me getting so much done, that we deliver when we're elected. We've shifted the agenda with our good ideas and the way we work. Caroline and I work as a team on the principles of listening to Londoners and bringing the voices of those who are ignored and marginalised into City Hall, and I'm really proud of that. On crime, we've shifted the focus from enforcement to supporting young Londoners to thrive, pushing to the fore a public health approach with our work on youth services. On housing, we've shifted the Mayor and the Assembly to be much more radical, bringing the voices of social housing into City Hall and getting ballots for estates after a long campaign that no one believed we could win. And on renting rights, we've used our political weight to shift the Mayor a long way. Even since the last Hustings, after I gave him the harshest grief about going slow on rent controls, the Mayor has now promised to push the government on this, and that's something he's literally been dismissing for years in our debates. On climate change and transport, Caroline has been amazing, not letting the Mayor get away with empty promises and making him set strong new targets. And there's lots of better policies in the new London plan thanks to us, particularly on housing, carbon, trees, green spaces and community involvement. A green legacy that could last until 2041. We've made our mark, but we can shift London politics really seismically next year with the right candidates and importantly with the right policies. I think we need to focus for 2020 on rights and power as much as we do on money. Nice as it is to win money for youth services, some real fundamentals need sorting out. We need to build the right to a secure home, the right to respect and the right to have a real say over the things that affect your life into every one of our new ideas for 2020. And to start, let's empower London citizens to solve our biggest problems. We need a Citizens' Climate Change Assembly to look at the deep challenges of stopping runaway climate change. And we need a People's Land Commission with every community hunting out the space for new homes that we need and working from the ground up to make plans, not the top-down nonsense that's broken so many of our communities apart. And for the same reason, I want our members' ideas at the heart of our manifesto with a members' policy assembly as soon as possible. So yes, a great campaign can put us in the big league in London. And as our candidate for Mayor, I can be part of a perfect green storm that will change the city forever. So choose me when you vote. I've never been more ready to win, and I can't wait to work with you all on getting this done. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sean, for kicking us off with your pitch. Over to Peter.
Thank you very much. I'm Peter Underwood. I'm not going to talk all about me because I don't believe in personality politics. I'm standing to be the representative of the Green Party, and that's the important thing. And London really needs green politics. Our compassionate, cooperative approach. We are the antidote to fascism and the division of the far right. And we go beyond the party tribalism of the other parties. We cooperate to actually get things done. With the Inclusive Party, we want everybody to be involved. We want all voices in London to matter. We want everybody, whoever their status, however their personal characteristics, to feel that they count and they're involved in the decision making in London. And we are the empowering party. It's not about, we're against having mayors because it puts too much power in one person's hands. We want to reverse that and actually put that power back into people's hands. And so standing for mayor, it's about putting power back into people, not taking power for ourselves. Because that's the problem we have in London. We have too many bad politicians who just care about grabbing power. They care about their own careers, they care about keeping their own parties good, they don't care about actually the people they represent. I'm standing in this election because I believe I'm different, and more importantly, I think the Green Party is different, and that's what we need to show to people. In terms of how we work in this campaign, the first thing we need to do is we need to stop being a protest vote. We need to start being a party of government. People aren't going to vote for us to hold other people to account. They want to vote for us because they want us in charge. They want us implementing those ideas. It's very easy to get green politics in action if we're the ones in government, we're the ones in charge, we're the mayor, than just trying to question other people. We also need to then break out of our stereotype. Being a green supporter is more than just caring about the environment. Climate change is the biggest threat to humanity. But most people don't think on that scale. Most people worry about, can I pay bills this month? Am I still going to have a job? Are my kids safe coming home from school? Those are the sort of issues that people really care about, and those are the sort of issues that we need to be talking to people about, because green politics does cover all of those. No, we're not starting from scratch. As Sean's already said, we've had brilliant assembly members, Darren and Jenny, Sean and Caroline have done wonderful work. The power of good ideas, the theme for the last election, was brilliant in showing that the Green Party has ideas that affect all areas of London life. It isn't just about the environment. And that's what we need to be showing people. The final part, which is what this is all about, is the fact of who fronts that campaign. Because, as I said, I don't like personality politics, but the mayoral candidate will get most of the limelight. We have 4 candidates here who all have very different characteristics. We have different ways of presenting ourselves, we have different ways. Your question, and the question to be answered today, is who do you think is the best person to represent the Green Party in that position? And it's not just who's going to appeal to Greens, it's who's going to appeal beyond that core vote to the whole of London. And then, following that, who's going to be able to work best effectively in City Hall with our other Assembly member candidates to achieve the most in London. So I hope you find this afternoon useful. I hope it helps in that decision-making process. And thank you all for coming.
Okay, so over to Shara, Dr. Shara Ali, our third contestant.
I've got my campaign slogan to show you. Let's just put that there. I've got permission to use this for my opening. Step up to the planet. So as mentioned, my name's Shara Ali. I know quite a few of you, and I'm really honoured to be able to present myself to you today as a prospective mayoral candidate for London. And I'm a bit nervous. I'm not nervous because I mind public speaking. I'm not nervous because I like projecting and presenting the Green Party's policies that I believe with in the core of my being. But I'm nervous because we're running out of time. And it's that message which I believe that the Green Party is the only game in town to be able to present, project and articulate with a passion at every possible opportunity. We have rising sea levels, melting ice caps, and climate change is nothing if not a social justice issue as well. Because people dying as we speak as a result generally of the West's addiction to overconsumption and fossil fuels. So we need to be unashamedly, unapologetically articulating our vision for a different world. To say that our responsibility goes well beyond the usual politics of the day, looking after number one, even looking after your nearest and dearest. It's much more than that, and it always has been for us. It's thinking about the species, the beautiful species we share this planet with. It's thinking about our children's children and well beyond, even 100 years ahead, and wondering what kind of planet are we leaving for them. And I want to be able to articulate at every opportunity why the green vision addresses those problems. Because we do. It's not the economy, stupid. It's the stupid economy that's the problem, which understands the price of everything and the value of nothing. Because what value do you put on a beautiful sunset or breathable air? What value does a series of zeros in your bank balance have if you don't know where your next meal is coming from? And that's everybody. Because climate change, whatever else it is, it's going to hit us all hard equally. So I want to make our campaign, the Green campaign, about stepping up to the planet. And at the same time, we'll be stepping up to the people and stepping up to the plate. So let me just say a little bit about what might make me qualified to do this, insofar there are qualifications. Well, I'm no extraordinary Green, but I'm an ordinary member, and that's what makes me extraordinary. Because if you understand what it is we stand for, you will understand everything that we need to do, which is truth, seeking truth and articulating objectively what our problems are. And yes, I've served as a candidate for the Assembly on more than one occasion, 2004, 2008, 2012 and 2016, alongside our brilliant Assembly members at every time. And I hope to get us in. But I want us to be ambitious. So let's get 25 Assembly members into City Hall and really have a shake-up and a movement. As a founding as a founding signatory to Extinction Rebellion as well, we understand that politics is much more than the ballot box. Politics is also about society, the wider society. And as children are organising strikes in schools, it is our responsibility to step up to those activities and those campaigns and say, we hear you. And this is going to be very difficult for us, for everybody. We're going to have to make a sea change. So when we explain and articulate our campaigning, we need to point out that everybody will be better off in a green world and a green environment. Even crime. What ultimately, because we're not just tough on crime, we're tough on the causes of crime. Whether it's knife crime, street crime, whatever it might be, people feeling dispossessed and without a stake in society. The one thing that would single-mindedly allow people to have a stake in society is the higher purpose of doing good, not just for themselves, but for everybody, for the environment, for future species, for future generations. And that ultimately is what the Green Party is about. The Green Party isn't about number one. It's about the whole world and our whole responsibility for the very being and the fabric of the world. Thank you. Please do consider voting for that.
Thank you, Shara. And for the last of the introductory statements, we move across now to Zach Lanston. Zach, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I will repeat the message. Thank you all for being here. You're giving up your Saturday morning, and it's appreciated, and afternoon, in fact. And thank you to everyone watching at home. On Monday, I went into a school in Battersea, the Harris Academy, to speak to 600 students there to do an assembly on growing your voice. As I looked out at the students, who seemed engaged from the word go, actually, I was surprised. I thought I was going to really have to win them over, but actually, within a sentence or two, they seemed quite happy to talk to someone. And the first thing I said, calibrating the teachers very carefully, I said, I don't really know what I'm going to say today, because it seems really hypocritical for me to talk about growing your voice and then just speaking at you for an hour. So in a moment, I want you to get into pairs, and I want you to spend 5 minutes coming up with what are the 3 things you want to change about London right now, whether it's in your small area of Battersea, whether it's across London, or maybe even think bigger, maybe it's the UK, Europe, or even the planet. What do you want to happen right now? Huge amount of noise in the room, everyone's chatting and chatting, there's a lot of kind of stuff going on. I'd love to say I got around 300 pairs in 3 minutes, I didn't, but I heard some great ideas. I then came back to the stage and said, who's got some burning ideas, what needs to change? A girl of about 12 years old puts her hand up and she said, I think we need more plants across London. I thought 2 things straight away. One, I thought, I've got 600 green votes here in the bag. And second, I thought this is a chance for her to speak about it. So I said to her, what is it about plants that you think is really important for London? I suspect there was someone who was an environmentalist in her family because she gave a beautiful explanation about pollution and about the effects of green plants and about mental health. And people seemed with her. I also used it as an opportunity myself to talk about Extinction Rebellion, the stuff that the Green Party's doing, and where we're moving towards the planet. Then a boy speaks about knife crime. This one's a bit harder to talk to a group of 11 to 16-year-olds about because you don't want to over-scare them, but also you've got to acknowledge that there's a threat out there. There were 15,000 stabbings last year on the streets of London. That's the largest ever in the history of recorded data. If you look at Glasgow, between 2006 and 2011, they had 60 stabbings. Then what they did was they turned it from being a crime issue to a mental health issue, a public protection issue. And so they talked more about prevention rather than punishment. Between 2011 and 2016, there wasn't a single stabbing. I think we really need to learn from projects like that and think about how do we govern this city. And finally, a young lady spoke up on homelessness. She didn't speak up on housing per se, because I think at that age, they've not yet experienced, thankfully, what it's like to have to pay the rent, although they've certainly experienced it from family. But they just said it was awful when they were walking through the streets of central London, just to see people on the streets, often disabled, begging, and awful obviously even if you're not disabled. A quarter of those people on the streets are LGBT youngsters, and they need our help. As well as that, one of the biggest causes of homelessness, we often get into conversations about drug and alcohol addiction, and of course that conversation needs to happen too. But the biggest cause is the end of tenancy. Just simply, you get to the end of your tenancy and you can't afford the rent rise. So I think as a Green Party, we really need to be pushing for those rent controls even more than we have, and it's fantastic to see movement on that. We also need to see an end of no-fault evictions, and we need to see the London Renters Union getting more power more money and more support from the rest of London. So as I was speaking to this assembly of youngsters, I listened to what they had to say, and I bounced back with what I had to say. And what I could feel in the room was a palpable buzz. A palpable buzz that even at that young age, and I admit to all of this story, they can't vote for us for another 10 years, but they can talk to their families about it. They can talk to everyone about it. Now, Peter frames really well the kind of didactic problem we have as Green Party members, that we are a team. It's about the planet, and it's not about us. But still today, you guys are picking a candidate. So by its nature, you need to pick a person. So just my final pitch with the last minute I have left. I think I have qualities that all the others have, and I have them in a mixture, and I think in some of them I really excel. I'm a committed campaigner. There hasn't been a Thursday in the past year that I haven't been at a by-election. Whether it's been in Hackney, Haringey, Lambeth, I've gone from borough to help out, to actually be on the doors in the evenings, some of them very cold evenings, knocking on doors and having those conversations with voters. I've been involved in policy writing. I'm on the working group for the Universal Basic Income. I'm also working on the anti-Semitism motion and various other things at conference. I make sure I'm there and I'm involved. And I'm a spokesperson. I'm a regular guest on certain radio shows on BBC London. I also make sure that I speak frequently on proportional representation, and I'm a massive advocate for, again, universal basic income. I look forward to the conversation today. I look forward to your questions. And again, thanks for being here. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to all four of our candidates. I think as has been said, some very different styles, but I think some real passion, real commitment coming through here. So it's now over to you and to, I think, anybody who's been watching as well. And thank you for organising that, to give us their questions. We should hopefully have time for maybe about 4 rounds if the questions are short. Okay, so let's start at the front.
Every year in London, between 8 and 12 children die from asthma. This is being linked to air pollution. Apart from the ULEZ and walking and cycling, what will you do to improve the air quality in London? So apart from the ULEZ, walking and cycling infrastructure, what else would you do to improve the air quality in London?
Thank you, and we'll take 2 more in this round.
Thank you. I'm Tim Summers, Lambeth Green Party. A question for all the candidates, please. Will all the Green candidates, if selected, urgently promote Green Party drug policy to decriminalise all drugs and to legalise cannabis for a London pilot scheme? I'm sure it's long overdue.
Okay, so 2 different, and third up. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Henrietta Lynch. My question is about housing, and I wanted to know from all the candidates, how could you actually implement policies to re-requisition empty housing, but also appropriate commercial space, a lot of which is empty as well, which could be used for housing. How can you actually do that?
Okay, so that's 3 big questions there. What else would you do on air quality beyond the ultra-low emission zone, walking, cycling? Secondly, a question about drug policy and potentially using London as a pilot project on legalisation of cannabis. And third, on housing, how to bring back into use empty housing and indeed commercial space. So, okay, Peter, let's start with you. You have, I would say, candidates can sort of play a bit of the timing, but approximately 3 minutes, and I'm not sure what I'm doing with this in front of me. But okay, I don't want to do anything. Okay, so I will stop doing what I was doing. Don't watch that, Peter. Over to you.
But on air pollution, firstly, the biggest problem with air pollution in London is transport. So we need to look at transport. You're right, there's measures like there's walking and cycling. To be public transport, the key thing I know personally when I walk out of the house in the morning, there's the option of getting in my car or the option of getting on a bus. Unfortunately, too often the car is the easier option. And that's the problem we have in London, is the fact that we need to improve public transport, make it cheaper, make it more effective, make it more efficient, make it more reliable, so that it becomes the easier option for people. So that it isn't just people getting in their cars to make those short journeys, but they actually use public transport as well. So I think the key issue in terms of tackling air pollution is actually tackling transport. Greening London in terms of more trees, more green walls, green spaces. If you're surrounded by concrete, it traps all the pollution in that area. We need to work on ways of getting rid of the pollution that's already there. Moving on to drug policy. Yes, it's green party policy. We should be promoting that. Drugs should be treated as a health issue, not as a criminal issue. And yes, we should be petitioning for licenses with the government to actually experiment within London. There are places like Needle Park in sort of European cities and in Copenhagen, and there's areas where it's been tried in other countries. In Portugal, where it's similarly, they've gone for the decriminalisation approach. There's examples we can build from. It's not airy-fairy, make it up from scratch. There's things we can learn from other areas of Europe, and we can implement it in London, and we should be pressurising the government to allow us to do that because it's the sensible solution. On housing, we've talked about previously having a London housing company in terms of building, but I agree that it's not just building new properties, it should be buying up properties that have already been built, using brownfield sites. My local council have done really interesting things, and they've just bought a hotel that was going out of business, and they're going to use that as a housing first approach in terms of getting people off the street and just giving them a rent. And I think those are the really interesting ideas about, I think Jonathan Bartlett said the other day, the fact that there is more rooms per person in London now than there's ever been. It isn't about building more houses, it's about using the stock that we've got more effectively, more efficiently, and a lot fairer. So yes, we do have compulsory purchase options, we have all sorts of things like that, but yes, getting that approach in there and in the London plan, that's what we want councils to be doing as well as from the London Assembly. And I'll stop there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Charlotte, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to take the first two questions together because I think there is a commonality with them. The main factor in stinky air and air asthma contribution is the Londoners and the car drivers, commuters' love affair with the motor car. And if we can try and fix that, we will be doing a lot for the health of our citizens. And absolutely, I would push, as with every green policy, for advancement, for rational policies in decriminalisation of cannabis, for sure.
Legalising, surely.
Yes. And what do those two things have in common? Well, what they have in common is that not every voter will see the immediate logic or appeal of that. And what we have to do in green politics is try and persuade. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we don't alienate people. So let's find better options for people. And you mentioned walking and cycling. And of course, they are an antidote to the car. So let's try and build in persuasive logic of how we can get people to move to better ways of living, which will help everybody, whether it's greater pedestrianisation or not necessarily moving to electrification of cars either, because one of the things that we're failing to see is how much energy goes into the manufacture of a road vehicle. So we need to try building into every public policy a climate change impact for everything that we do. In terms of housing, as I often say, housing is a basic right, it's a basic need. It's not something that we should be competing with one another on council waitlists for. That is humiliating, it's unconscionable, and we need to get a grip of that. Absolutely, when I last checked, no less than 20,000 empty properties across London, and it's obscene. And if you look at the number of, a lot of these properties are actually being used, of course, for making a quick buck from foreign investors. So we can do something about that, as other cities have. But for sure, refurbishment is the way, because again, it's less carbon intensive, and there are enough houses there, and there's enough goodwill out there. When we hear and we read even Green Party members giving over rooms to migrants. And guess what? We will be the new migrants if climate change carries on as it is at the moment.
Thank you, Shara. And Zach.
Thank you. Last night, as I was falling asleep, rather than partying on the streets of London, I was watching the Labour Mayoral Hustings from 2015, because I know how to have a Good Friday night. The reason why I was watching it was I wanted to watch what Sadiq Khan said last time when he was running for selection, to be able to compare to some of the things he's saying this time and see where he's delivered. And there was a fascinating conversation about air pollution, where it was actually him, David Lammy and Christian Walmart Christian Walmart was having a great time saying, I'm the Green candidate for mayor, even though he was in the Labour Party, and I'm glad to see all the Labour mayoral candidates swinging towards green issues. Steve Khan was very vague about it, as he's continued to be. And David Lammy said that 2020 was far too late for ULEZ to come to London. I mean, so he was close with when it did actually come. But my point is this, that actually even then in 2015, during that kind of Labour stretch of mayoral hustings, they went from ridiculing the idea of talking about air pollution to actually being one of their key issues. So I'm not ignoring your question here, but the first thing I want to answer is about cycling, because I think cycling is a huge part of it. But I think to encourage cycling, we need segregated cycle lanes, and we need to make sure that whoever is mayor is following through on those cycling promises. I accept, though, it's not the full thing. So here's some of the things I'd like to do. Paris has more air quality monitors just in the city of Paris than the entire continent of Africa. We're pretty pathetic with the air quality monitors in London. I'd love to see more air quality monitors, even at buggy height. I know that's quite draconian, but actually, as mothers or fathers are pushing, or whoever is pushing around their baby in the pram, they can literally see at the level what pollution that is doing, that dirty air, to their child's breath. I'd love to see us doing more educational pieces about that. Not necessarily about scaring and shocking, but about educating and informing. Of course, I want to extend out ULEZ as well, but I know that wasn't part of the question. But I think whatever it needs to be, we need to be making sure that we're putting air quality front and centre, and also linking it to climate change. There are obviously different things, but I think we need to educate the public about what those differences are and how they do interlink and what we can do to make sure we're saving the planet. Cannabis is a really easy answer. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, or drank alcohol, or taken a drug, so I'm a very clean candidate in that sense. That doesn't make a difference though. If people want to smoke cannabis, they absolutely should be able to smoke cannabis. It should not be a punishment issue. So absolutely, as a Green mayoral candidate, I would be pushing for the legalisation of cannabis, including an experiment in London. So I'm very, very open to that, and in fact, we'll push for it. With housing, Henrietta, I think we've had this conversation personally, but I'll repeat it while there's other people in the room. I've moved house in London 12 times in 10 years. I'm also a guardian. For those of you who don't know what guardians is, I live in abandoned old buildings for cheaper rent to protect the building before they find something to do with it. There are 20,000 of these empty buildings in London. In just my building alone, I would say there's 18 of us, and there's probably about 35 rooms. But because of the rules of houses of multiple occupation and showers, lots of those rooms are empty. Over Christmas, we let some homeless people in because we live in the centre of Westminster. There's literally hundreds, and I mean hundreds of homeless people. There's tented villages. One of them is outside Habitat on Oxford Street. So you can see all the lush kind of beautiful beds, and then just in front of it, people freezing in doorways. If ever there's an image of how London is failing our citizens. We were disciplined for it. We were told if we do that again, we will be evicted from our building because we're letting people in. Now that's a separate conversation about guardian campers, but I think the main conversation is clear. We have so much empty space, we have so many people on the streets. It doesn't take a lot of maths to work out that we need to get those people into a warm, comfortable place and make sure we've got homes for everyone.
And Sean.
Thank you, Rosamond, for quite a challenging question, asking us to not talk about walking and cycling. I think there's three things I would say. One is about information, as Zach was just saying there. We've had this in our manifesto before. People need to be aware when the air is bad to protect their health. And we've said before we want to put the air pollution monitors on every street and have them displaying what the air is like and warning people that the air is bad that day. And I think that is really important whilst we haven't sorted it out. To sort it out, the ultra emission zone, as you know, stops and does not include the north and south circular. We need something London-wide, and it isn't just a wider ULEZ, it's road pricing that depends on the time of day, the emissions of your car, and how far you travel. At the moment, the emissions charges we have, you pay once and you can drive around all day if you want to. There's no relation to the actual amount of pollution. That needs to be developed. We were the only people really pushing it at the last election. We've done some work in the Assembly now, and we've got some positions from the rest of the parties. I think it will be more prominent in this election, but we'll still be the only ones with the real courage to talk about it properly. And in terms of something that isn't being done at all, we need to get a grip on deliveries and logistics. And I think the Mayor is in a good position to talk to the people who drive around all day in vans, delivering lots of different things to lots of different places, and just get that rationalised. At the moment, there's no leadership on that whatsoever. On drug policy, completely, Tim. I mean, one of the things that's really highlighted the problem recently is the county lines problem, which is young people from London being exploited, more or less living in slavery and debt to people who make them go out and do horribly dangerous things, dealing and distributing drugs around the country. And also the knife crime epidemic we've seen. We had a debate in Camden Council where people came to us and said, look, these young people, they can't get a decent job. They are so tempted to go down Camden Market and take the money and do the drug work, and it puts them in so much danger, and it's ridiculous. Now, we tried decriminalisation in a small part of London as a small experiment a few years ago, and it wasn't very, very successful because it was just a small part. Everybody flocked to Lambeth to buy drugs, basically, and that was not good for Lambeth. We need to look at something London-wide, and I think the answer is a legal, regulated supply. That's a big ask, but it changes. These things change quickly. It's changed in America, and it's been quite successful, and I think we need to look at that for London as well. We had an interesting briefing from Transform, who are the campaign for drug legalisation, with some of our Assembly member colleagues from parties you might not expect, who are taking a very strong interest in this, so we may get somewhere soon. On housing, the People's Land Commission I talked about, one of the things we would do is spot the empty buildings, the abandoned sites. We get the local people to say what they want there. And there are powers like community development orders, which grant planning permission in advance for what they want on those sites, whether that's refurbishment or rebuilding. And once that planning permission is in place, the incentive then for the council or the mayor or the government to find money to buy up those sites is really big. And I think starting from the ground up like that, like I've suggested, is the way to do that. There are powers and they're just not being used. Okay,
So thank you all very much on the first round. Just so that if we're looking at a 12-minute total of speaking time, I'll just fill people in. Sean's 3 minutes 9 seconds, Peter 2 minutes 45, Shara 2 minutes 28, and Zach 3 minutes 40. So just beware that we don't end up just yes or no for the last question. Okay, so we'll take the next round of questions. Were there any that have come in that?
Do have a couple from. Oh, excuse me, sorry.
Okay, so Phil, do you want to give us those?
Bear with me. So we have London is a world centre for the Palestinian solidarity movement. How would you ensure that the Mayor and GLA give practical support to that movement? One from Adele Ward in Barnet. Please ask the mayoral candidates what their personal position is on Brexit, whether they feel they should go ahead or whether they would campaign against it, and if they favour campaigning for the people's vote and would campaign strongly for Remain if such a vote happened.
Okay, so another couple of easy questions to answer in a minute, and is there a third one from here?
Yes, I'd like to ask about the actual election process, how we actually handle it. I mean, we have this proportional representation now. What is the best way, the most effective way to utilise that system so we push the Green candidates up the ladder? Because I don't think it's quite as simple as people think. I just have that impression. I just wonder whether somebody could give me the sort of the 10-point plan for how to vote in proportional representation systems.
Okay, so the questions then are on the issues around the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign and how that could be supported from the mayoral and assembly level. Brexit, hats off to anybody who can answer this in the time going. But support for a people's vote, or what, if not, what else? Candidates' personal views on that. And thirdly, the electoral process that we have within London for the Assembly, for the Mayor. What's the best way to actually handle that, to push people, push Greens up the list, make it more successful. Charlotte, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. Can I stand up for this? I just like to see who I'm speaking to a bit better. Right. So, a very important question on Palestine solidarity. We are nothing if not a party for human rights. And I've heard even this mayor, talk about staying out of Palestine politics. That's just not an option. As a mayor of an international city, you are expected to have a view and to articulate that view. And I'm very proud of the Green Party's position on Palestine. And we have some strong and sometimes very unpopular policy on building a movement, and that includes a campaign for divestment and sanctions. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. So I'd like to see City Hall take a lead on that. And that also means not clamping down on free speech, in particular through the IHRA definition. That is not a way of promoting Palestinian politics. It is a way of stigmatizing and criminalizing people who are fighting for the human rights of our fellow human beings. And I would not be signing up to that definition in City Hall either, if I were elected in any capacity. In terms of people's vote, absolutely. I would be campaigning strongly to remain in the European Union if we had a people's vote. And Jean said earlier, if you run out of time, you may have the option of only saying no or yes, but the other option would be omni shambles, because that's basically what we're faced with at the minute. And it's like, we have no idea, and having worked in the European Parliament, my sense is that if the bureaucrats and the commissioners, the unelected negotiators are saying that there is no room to budge, and to do so publicly, I'm pretty sure that May is going to come back with egg on her face, and we'll just have postponed the inevitable. And I, as a Democrat, and as Greens, we should seek to uphold the referendum result. But we've had such a shambles, we have had such Mickey Mouse politics, Machiavellian horse trading, and we've seen corruption at the centre of the Leave campaign. Absolutely, I would very much endorse a people's vote to try and test the will of the public. And I believe with more voters as well, the younger generation, that we would win that vote if we are able to have it. And the likelihood of possibility of having Jean in the Parliament for even longer, which would be a great thing as well. And finally, on proportional representation, I think we should fight every election, whether it's first past the post, because Caroline Lucas got in. Why? Despite the fact it was first past the post, because people vote for what they believe in. So personally, having stood in many general elections and proportional elections, European and London Assembly, I feel as if our style of delivering politics is essentially the same. Vote for what you believe in, and vote, you will then get what you want. And it's even more obvious in the London Assembly, because it is proportional. People have no excuse, because if any of you like me, you go out door knocking and they'll say, well, I'd vote for you if I thought you would win. And the answer should be, well, if I had a vote for every person who said I'd vote for you if I would win, then we'd be in already. And so they will be deprived of that excuse. And let's make sure that that would be my number one tactic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Zach.
Thank you. I'll be quick because I'm aware I'm saving time now. On the Palestinian issue, I want to be very clear that I stand with Palestinian solidarity. I think both as a Green Party and as private citizens, it's important that we make sure that we protect minority rights. As a Jewish person, though, I feel the need to respond to some of Shiraz's comments. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are on the rise in London and across the UK. The IHRA, very specifically, especially when we brought it to Green Party conference, the very first line said it is not anti-Semitic to criticise Israel. So I think both of these things can be true. We can make sure we're preventing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and be very clear that we stand with the Palestinian people. They deserve much better leadership. Benjamin Netanyahu is an outrage and we need to stand against that, and we can do that without trampling on the rights of minority citizens back here at home. On Brexit, this one's very easy. I saw Jean talk the other night in Islington. She spoke incredibly eloquently about the disaster that is Brexit, what it's going to do to our environmental protections, to our animal protections, to the Cochrane principles. I would do everything I could to make sure that we had a people's vote, and I would campaign very hard for Remain. And finally, proportional representation. I'll be very quick on this one. I think in the past, both us and other parties have used very complex ideas of vote this on the orange paper and vote this on that paper. I think we need one simple message, which is vote green. If you want to save the planet, vote green. If you want better housing, vote green, etc., etc., etc. Vote green. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sean.
Yes, so I think the Palestine Solidarity movement is feeling very beleaguered at the moment, not just because of things like the IHRA definition, but also the rise of Islamophobia affects them too. I've been talking, as well as I did vote for the IHRA definition, I've also been talking to men who work on Islamophobia about them putting together a wider definition of Islamophobia, because people are too often connected to extremism and violence just because of their religion, and it's the same problem. And I think what we can do practically to support Palestine Solidarity events at the moment particularly is to defend their right to be held, to defend their right to have debates. In Camden, we've incorporated the IHRA definition in the council within a framework that puts free speech, very importantly, and then these things alongside it. And when there was an event planned on Palestine solidarity, and lots of people piped up and said, "Oh, anti-Semitism definition." We and lots of other people from Camden and the Green Party raised the problem of this not being an anti-Semitic event and this being about free speech and the ability to criticise Israel. And the event went ahead because this definition put those two things aside each other. And I think that's what we have to do, is to make sure that the debates continue and make sure that definitions are not overused, but also make sure that we get this definition of Islamophobia included, I think, in our policy as well. On Brexit, yes, we are the ones who put the People's Vote motion to the Assembly. This got the Mayor on board. I think this was a crucial stage in growing the People's Vote campaign. And we must fight for Remain in any referendum. And we must learn the lessons of the last campaign as well. Caroline Lucas has been writing extremely well about how we can learn not to alienate or patronise the people who voted Leave, and how to be sure that we do change the problems that they were highlighting with that vote if we do get out of Brexit and keep leaving and all of that. In terms of getting our Assembly vote up, it frustrates me that last time I got the highest amount of second preference votes, but the gap between that and the Assembly votes we got was bigger than ever. We kept our Assembly members, this was all fine, but we could have got so many more votes if we converted more of those people. And I think, like Zach says, we have focused a little bit too much on colours of ballot paper and not the reasons you would vote for us on the Assembly. And I think we have to stress our team, our party as a good thing in itself, our long record on the Assembly, and get people voting for us on the party vote, because it is the only ballot paper where you vote for a party.
Okay, thank you.
The last time I'm in danger of repeating a lot of what's been said.
That's why I'm trying to change who goes first each time.
Quickly going through Palestinian solidarity, yes, I think as Mayor, as members of the Assembly in London, we should be standing with oppressed people all over the world. We should be highlighting those issues, we should be making sure those are visible. In terms of Palestine, there is this problem of the fact that some people use supporting Palestine as a form of anti-Semitism, and some people use trying to promote Israel, trying to clamp down on free speech about Palestine. We need to be clear about calling out the wrongs on both sides, so that we can be clear that we are in favour of Palestinian rights and we are against anti-Semitism. We're against anti-Semitism, make sure we get that right way around. And that we can call out people in both camps who are perverting the debate by trying to use one or the other. So yes, we should be clear, and we should be supporting the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. And in terms of the IHRA definition, I think it's similar, that having looked through that definition, we can accept it and we can still have free speech and criticise Israel. It's allowable within that definition. I think it becomes a storm in a teacup arguing over that. I think we need to just make clear that position that we're against all forms of discrimination and move on to actually talk about the issues. In terms of Brexit, I'm completely anti-Brexit. I think Green Party believes that decisions should be made at the appropriate levels. And for some things like climate change and international taxation, things like that, those decisions need to be made at international levels, so we must be part of international bodies like the European Union and the United Nations. So I'm clearly against Brexit. In terms of respecting the result, I hate that phrase, because we know the Leave campaign cheated, and the result was that the country was split. It was very, very close, 52-48. Respecting that result means accepting the fact that people aren't clear on this position, and that's what we must work from. And I agree, Caroline's been doing some brilliant work in terms of understanding why people voted to leave. So if we think that staying is the best way, we must understand why people voted to leave and tackle those issues. Because actually most of the problems they're talking about are about Westminster and are about the local councils and are about what's happening in this country, not about Europe at all. And so we must be clear on that. I campaign actively for the people's vote, and of course I'll campaign to remain in that campaign. The electoral process, I agree with a lot of what's been said. There is an element of education, as Sean pointed out, getting so many seconds. Somebody pointed out to me yesterday, you're getting so many second place votes that actually we switch that the other way around. There is an element of education, but I also agree, fundamentally, it must be built on a vote Green on everything message. In fact, as I said in my opening thing, that we must present ourselves as the party that wants to be in power. So it's worth voting for us on everything. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much indeed. And just to say one thing on the what happens with Brexit, depending on the timing and what happens with the European Parliament, I would not be staying after June anyway. I had said in my election pitch last time round that this would have been my final term. So, you know.
But you never said that on camera. Oh no. Sorry.
I did, and at the time, and I'm sure that people commence. Well, that's, you know, but so if the party's selecting, you know, I'm not running. I'm not even walking fast. Okay, so let's move to our third round of questions. If I say now that Chalmers used 5 minutes 46, Peter 5 minutes 44, Zara 5:46, and Zach now 5. Okay.
I mean, I win.
Well, it depends what the competition is you think they're in. Okay, but just so that, because I know it can be a bit difficult for people at the end to see the timers that I've got in front of me here. So if we could move to the next round, were there questions? Yes.
What would you do to actively support a depleted Metropolitan Police Service to tackle increasing violent crime?
Yeah.
How will you campaign differently to Stand Up as a Labour Party?
Okay. And can I? Right, go on, Carol.
Can you give an example of a campaign win that you're really proud of?
Okay, so three very great questions. So in terms of what would you do to support in terms of depleted Metropolitan Police Force and rising crime? How do we differentiate ourselves clearly from the Labour Party in campaigning? And then finally, there's a particular campaign win that you've been involved in that you are particularly proud of. So, Zach, let's start with you.
Fantastic. So starting off with the Metropolitan Police. At the risk of stating the obvious, our police have been decimated on the streets. And it's such a false economy, because actually when you think about things like community police officers, and you think about subjects like terrorism, actually a lot of the time people are more comfortable going to a familiar face to say, actually I've noticed something a little bit suspicious than going to a police officer who they've never recognised and never seen before. So I think, first of all, that's the first thing to point out, that this has been a completely false economy. It's been incredibly politically motivated, and there's been nothing inevitable about it. So I think, first of all, we need to restore police services. It's not quite connected, although it is very connected. Sian's been doing incredible work on local youth services. She released a report about how many local youth services have been left. Now, I know that's not directly connected to policing, but of course, if young people aren't finding where to go, then that's when we start to have problems. So I think as well as restoring police numbers, we also need to give young people, not the only ones committing crime, but give them something to do. With that, though, I think we also need to be cautious. I'm very nervous about this facial recognition technology that seems to be being pushed more aggressively over the past couple of months. It has been voluntarily, but we all know that that can be mission creep about how much permission are the police given to hold all of that data about someone. Also on stop and search, it's an incredibly discriminatory policy. It's often young people from ethnic minority backgrounds who are stopped and searched, and very often it actually comes back to the cannabis question. Then they're given a criminal record for something that never should have been illegal anyway, and we're into a vicious cycle that only exacerbates tensions between minority communities and the police. So yes, I completely support the police, with caution of making sure that we look at what they're doing. On the Labour Party question, I've lost the gentleman. There you are. I think this isn't a criticism of any of the other candidates, but I think it's about doing things differently. You'll notice I haven't given a leaflet to anyone, and I haven't done this whole campaign. It's not because I'm incredibly against leaflets, although I think it can be greener, but it's actually I've been doing a lot of stuff on social media. I got a video together that I put a lot of time and effort into, and I made sure that on my campaign messages I've been consistent all the way through. I think it's about campaigning differently, and I don't think that means never leafleting. There's lots of evidence that leaflets work. But I don't know if other people have had the experience of when you knock on a door in a by-election or any election, and people are actually sick, that they've had 25 leaflets that they've not read from all the different parties. So I think we've got to find different, more creative, fun ways to campaign, and I think that's how we can really, really step out. This is where I'm going from memory. Third question, big campaign win. So I sit on the cross-party parliamentary alliance for proportional representation. What that is I sit with the different MPs who support PR. In our case, we've obviously only got Caroline Lucas, so often I sit with her, or either Womack sits there. One campaign we did just a couple of months ago was we tried to get 650 people in every constituency to all lobby their MP on proportional representation. I was a little bit sceptical at first if we could even get to 100. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, and it ended up actually being the same day as the first vote for the withdrawal agreement, which wasn't perfect timing. But actually, lots of people did turn up, lots of MPs did turn up, and some MPs who are sceptical. And actually those MPs afterwards have started to pledge to commit to proportional representation, which we all know as Greens is the #1 way you can get Greens elected and get representation. Now over 100 Labour constituencies have signed up to say that they will support PR if there's a general election in the manifesto. It's not good enough, we need Jeremy Corbyn, we need John McDonnell more supported, etc. But I think it's a big campaign win in terms of the future in our electoral processes and how we can get Greens represented.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
I'll start with the Labour Party one, if that's okay, because I think, what we've got at the national level is the Labour Party as the opposition. They're going, just elect us and everything will be perfect. In fact, don't do anything else like people's right in the meantime, just elect us and everything will be perfect. And I think in London we've got a completely different situation. We've had a Labour mayor for the past 4 years. We can hold him to account on his record. And I think the real point we need to be making is that whilst Sadiq Khan's been in City Hall, the Greens have been the main opposition, because we've got 12 Labour Assembly members who aren't the opposition. We've got 7 Tories? 8 Tories, thank you Caroline. So 8 Tories who appear to be 7 to me, and are not very effective either. And their candidate is one of this quite ineffective number of Tory AMs. And I think we can stand out by being the opposition, and not the Yahoo sucks opposition, not the Punch and Judy, but the ones who actually make constructive suggestions, who call out the mayor when he's not doing things right and push him actually get him to change things. So I think that's our role. And going to Caroline's question, which is a campaign win, I always try and set goals that are concrete, something actually changes. And obviously I've done some things like win funding for youth services and that kind of thing, but I think the most important changes you make are changes to the rules, because they carry on and they affect all the subsequent decisions that get made. They're not just one decision. And so winning the campaign to get ballots for a space, I think will have a huge impact on London, and I'm really, really proud of that, because no one believed that was possible. The Mayor put out the draft policy that was against ballots, and it took an enormous effort working with groups across London, getting so that 95% of the responses to the consultation said, no, can we have ballots please, to get that change done. So I'm most proud of that. In terms of the Met, it's absolutely true. So it's unusual for Greece to be going to give the Met more resources, because often we do question their tactics, things like facial recognition, things like stop and search. They're the ones who have the bag of hammers. So of course lots of things look like nails to them, and we are a bit more holistic than that in the Greece. We want to tackle things from a public health approach and preventive approach. But I know that the police are really short of resources. They haven't got the time to do the community policing, to do the preventive work that we'd really like the police to be doing, diverting people from crime. And I know that their shift patterns are in absolute state at the moment. They are getting hardly any rest. And this is not fair on a massive group of workers who are there to keep us safe. So we need the money from the government. I don't think the government's going to give it to us until just before the election, and they're going to try and give Sean Bailey, the Tory candidate, credit for it. And I think every day we spend in the meantime with an underfunded police service while they wait to make their political move is an absolute disgrace.
Okay. And Peter, yes.
Picking up on Sean was saying about the police, they do an incredibly difficult job, and we need to respect that. I wouldn't want to do their job. And they are incredibly underfunded, and we need to push, because we do need more police officers, for them to be able to do their job effectively. Because at the moment they're being forced into taking shortcuts, like facial recognition and doing stuff and such, because that's all they feel they have time to do. They don't have the time. For me, I've never understood why some form of policing is called community policing and the rest isn't. All policing should be community policing. Community officers, police officers are part of our community, and they should be working as part of our community to be policed by consent. Given that they are under-resourced, we need to be working with the groups outside to make their life easier. I was watching the BBC had a talk show on knife crime, and it was talking about the fact there are lots of community groups who are working to stop knife crime in their communities, who know the people involved, who know issues are, and are trying to come up with solutions. We should be supporting them so that they're using the crime in the first place. The police officer on that show is taking knives off the streets and arresting people. It's like, well, it's too late. We've got to stop people picking up a knife in the first place. We need to look at those preventative issues rather than just trying to... There's no point, arresting more people is too late. All the crimes have already happened. Moving on to Labour, I've got no idea what Labour stands for. So in terms of differentiating ourselves from Labour, it becomes really difficult, because all Labour seems to be at the moment, they're trying to use the old triangulation method of being not quite the Tories. So whatever the Tories come out with, they say, oh, well, we're not as bad as them. They're not actually standing for anything. It's the big issue, things on Brexit. What is the Labour policy on Brexit? Immigration bill that went through recently that Labour didn't really oppose. What is Labour standing for? I think we can differentiate ourselves because we need to be upfront with our values and upfront with our policies. We're honest about who we are and honest about what we stand for. And I think people pick up on that and they like that honesty about the fact that we're true to what we are and we know what we believe in. We're not just trying to play off against somebody else. Campaign wins. I'll pick a little one that we had recently. We got Croydon Council to ban the use of glyphosate in parks. It was a really simple thing. For me, one of the things I loved about it was the fact that we managed to pull in so many different, it wasn't just green people, it was parents who cared about their children playing on play equipment that was covered in nasty cancer-causing chemicals. It was sort of people who were walking down the street and saw these sprays everywhere. We brought in people from all over the place. And also, we don't have a green representative on Croydon Council. The only way we got it done was actually working with some actually quite good Labour people who were in the council who understood the importance of the issue. And it was actually working with them and the evidence and picking up on that wave and being able to get things done. And so for me, that was the important. The important thing wasn't that it was a green thing, it was actually just getting it done. It was an important thing getting it done. So yes, I think that's my favourite thing at the moment.
Okay, it's very good successes that we've got running around here. Catch up.
So thanks very much for those questions. I might mention a few campaigns along the way before I choose one at the end. Firstly, on policing, I have been very active throughout my time in the Green Party on civil liberties issues, whether getting British residents back from Guantanamo, campaigning against a very bad anti-terror policy on shoot to kill, for example, when we had the Menezes shot dead on the underground in Stockwell, and there was a lot of work needed on that in dialogue with the police. And I want to emphasise something that Peter said, which I think is very true, is that when we do politics, it mustn't simply be about opposition. We need to be empathetic. And I've met senior policemen, as I know Sean and Caroline, I met with them and Superintendent Chisty, do you remember that? And the last time? Very insightful. These are people who really care, just like you and I. They're parents, they want to live in a safe city as well. And on the other side as well, you have blatant racism. I was recently a witness to a racist attack. I took that all the way as a witness to the court, and that victim got a settlement. So I can see on both sides that we need to be zero tolerance with respect to institutionalised racism and try and find ways of developing that. In terms of policing, community policing on the ground, it needs to be intelligence-led. The Green Party isn't against stop and search as such. We are in favour of a certain amount of intervention, but it needs to be intelligence-led. And what I would give to have a police force which were as visible as your average car parking attendant, or somebody who's going to slap, for those of you who own a car, you'll see how visible they are even if you just look around you. So it is possible. And when we've had great anti-terror risks and we've had more police on the street, people have been reassured. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think in a society which is becoming more divisive for all the wrong reasons, we need to make sure that we have more visible presence. How do we stand out from Labour? Well, yeah, it upsets me actually that we don't present ourselves as, in a more bold fashion, as the antidote to all politics. And it's often said, almost flatteringly, oh, they can borrow our policies, they can copy our policies, Labour is borrowing our policies. That's not good enough. Because guess what? They don't believe in our policies. Just as Corbyn was on the rails when he was being challenged about, do you really believe in unilateral disarmament? Do you remember that, when he first became leader? Or do you really believe in no to Trident rule? He couldn't really argue this. Which if you get Molly Scott Caton or any other Green, they'll be able to defend those policies because we believe in them. So let's be unapologetic about the fact that we are the true antidote to Labour. And same with our HRA definition. The number of Labour Party members who came to us and said, we are so glad the Green Party hasn't signed up to that and been bullied into that clampdown on free speech. So we are going to be presenting ourselves across the political spectrum and to no political spectrum, because we are essentially appealing to the human being in their own right. And finally, in terms of campaign wins, well, any amount of policing campaigns to do with UK Border Agency, we've had some great campaign wins, also to do with those racist ban slogans, and the surveillance culture, prevent policy. we finally had a review of Prevent, which is something that I've also campaigned very hard alongside other Greens. But my main, the thing that I most cherish actually is a cross-party political and community campaign to save a site of special scientific interest. And these beautiful spaces that you come across in London, we have great, beautiful spaces with nature, the Welsh Harp in this case on North Circle Road. That was a win because we were trying to prevent overdevelopment in a place where it wasn't needed. And to think that party politics or politics isn't just about human beings, but about the greater nature that we share the planet with, for me that was a real inspiration.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Again, for you want where we are at timings. Okay, Sean, you've used 8 minutes 33 seconds. Peter, 8:53. Sorry. Sharon 9:46 and Zach 8:25. I'm sure this all means a great deal to everybody. These are not betting odds, these are a number of minutes used. Okay, so let's move to our fourth round. Are there other questions? 2 more? Yeah, let's take 2 that have been sent in and we can add a couple of others. Yeah.
So we've got, this is from Lee Baker. Should black cabs be exempt from the congestion charge? And then from Elena Ship, specifically in terms of what the London Mayor's role is. What would you do to stand up for the rights of transgender Londoners, especially in the upwelling of transphobia we've seen in the aftermath of the Gender Recognition Act consultation?
Okay, so that's there that have been sent in. I think there's a question at the back. Yes.
This is right. My background is Muslim. I'm a British Muslim. One of the things that really came up for me, when this big anti-Semitism row came out, was there was a key issue that wasn't addressed by any of the politicians, and that word anti-Semitism. I personally am against anti-Semitism in any way, shape, and form. Being a Muslim. At the same time, the word anti-Semitism for me as a Muslim means coming from the seed of Abraham. So from the seed of Abraham came the Muslims and the Jews. So when we're sitting there and we talk about anti-Semitism, the Palestinians, they're actually Semites as well. So what is in these people, what is in the candidates here? Take that forward and say, well, actually, we agree with every definition of anti-Semitism. However, the Palestinians are also Semites, so let's throw them in that same group. That actually covers a lot of, evils about anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. You saw Islamophobia about Islam, okay? Anti-Semitism is about the Jews, right? Is it about different religions, or is it about coming from a specific group? That's the question that goes out to you. What are you looking at with that on the agenda?
Okay, I think we can take that maybe a little bit more. We did have a question about the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign earlier on, which also touched on a number of these issues. So was there another question at this point? This may be last one in here. And if not, then can I add one? Abuse my position as chair. Yeah, this is the one you always have this thing about your question you don't want to answer. This is not it. Okay. Jobs. The issue about skills in London, that we have a considerable number of London's population that, we have one of the biggest sort of skills gaps, I think, sort of within the UK. A considerable number of people in London that, have very basic skills levels, as well as a number that are extremely highly skilled and not so much in the middle. So what are we going to do about helping to improve the skills base of London's population? So that's my question to throw in, to add to the issue about exempting black cabs from congestion charge, the question about transgender and dealing with that issue and in the rise of the particular sort of levels of hate and tension that have been over that. People want to come back on the one about where Muslims sit within the definition of anti-Semitism and skills. All of that, your starter for, however many points. Sean, let's start.
Thank you very much. So yeah, at the moment, most of the clean air initiatives are not including black cabs, and part of the reason for that is because they've got a different scheme where they have to replace their cars, their cabs with electric cabs. But actually the bigger problem we have is congestion, and I think the thing I was talking about earlier, the wider road pricing, which is based on time of day and distance and all of that, the black cabs, their charging structure needs to be part of that as well. I think if you're going to be driving a car and paying a charge, then if you're in a cab you should be paying the same charge, so they should be included. They can't be excluded, and I don't like the way the cabs throw the weight around and do things like block Tottenham Court Road every time we try and put a cycling scheme in. They're not endearing themselves to me by doing that. In terms of standing up for trans Londoners, I've been doing quite a lot of work on this in the Assembly, and so have a lot of Assembly members actually. We've been looking through the Mayor's Questions database and seeing just how many times we ask about trans hate crime, which is growing alongside Islamophobic hate crime, anti-Semitic hate crime. Trans hate crime is growing hugely as well, and let's face it, it's often the same kinds of people who are exhibiting these different kinds of bigotry, and we need to be fighting it on absolutely all levels. Other things I've been working on are getting more inclusion, getting more diversity, making sure that more things are gender blind and name blind, and on all of those things. I think it's really important that we do stand up for what are London's values and the Assembly's values, which is embracing all of our diversity, supporting all of our citizens, really importantly. If I can just say, I know Shara's put this into his actual pitch for London to bring this debate into City Hall. And I have to say, Shara, you'd actually be doing that, because not even the UKIPs have decided to start on trans people in the time that I've been there. I can find nothing from them apart from a slightly strange question about police hats in the MQ's database. And I think that's right, because the Assembly's values are London's values. They are the Green Party's values. We embrace all our citizens, and I really hope that that doesn't happen. Skills gene. I mean, that's completely right. What we have in London is a weird situation where fewer of our young people go to university, even though we get quite well educated in our schools. We don't find young people in university. Caroline's been exposing how many apprentices are not paid anything like the living wage, and that's going to actually deter people from doing apprentices, stop people finishing their apprenticeships. The Mayor now has new responsibilities for skills and a new strategy. This is an area that Caroline works on, but I'm certain that we need to be making sure that we have policies that we maybe didn't have in past manifestos to deal with this that are really, really strong. And this goes along with supporting young Londoners when they're in youth clubs. Many youth clubs that I visited are there with excellent facilities now for giving people skills, and those youth clubs are under threat, so we must stop that happening.
Okay, thank you.
Starting with black cabs. Black cabs are part of public transport, because if people are using cabs, they're not driving their own cars around. So even though we have issues with black cabs, they're part of the public transport system. They're a way of enabling people to get around London without having to use their own vehicles, so taking vehicles off the street. But like all public transport, we want to get away from diesel and nasty fuels that are in the atmosphere and to move to electric. So I would say that we'd want to say electric cabs don't charge, but we may want to be looking at whether diesel cabs do, because they're contributing to the problem. We equally need to match that with support to enable cab drivers to be able to switch to electric cabs, because it's a lot of money for people who are self-employed. And so it needs to be part of a wider package. But yes, we need to think of cabs as part of the transport system, but making them clean cabs, so they're electric, so they're not adding to the pollution. They have to sit in it all day. Cab drivers know how filthy London's areas. It shouldn't be too much to push to actually move towards electric cabs. In terms of the rights of transgender people, of course we should be at the forefront of supporting transgender people in that fight. It's the cutting edge of the civil rights movement for me at the moment. I'm old enough to remember working with gay friends back in the 1980s, working on gay rights, and it seems that we're coming across, it's just repeating the same sorts of fears and misunderstandings and things coming through that people have faced in the civil rights movements, and we need to sort of take that forward, support trans people, and also to help overcome those fears. People are scared, and so we need to be able to help people to come past that fear and understand the difference between trans rights and the threats that they feel they are facing. And we need to get those issues off. And we have a role in doing that as allies to trans people to sort of take those rights forward. And they get the same rights as everybody else in society. That's the important thing. Which comes back to Semitism, anti-Islamophobia. I'm anti-discrimination. People are people. And as soon as we start looking at people, as people start saying, oh, the better the world will be. In terms of the terminology, there's people bring discrimination from all sorts of different reasons in themselves and for all sorts of things they're trying to achieve. So sometimes it's useful to break it down in terms of a specific type of discrimination like Jewish anti-Semitism or anti-Islamophobia, so that we can look at the causes of that and it helps us deal with the education and tackling that in society. But I think our view is there shouldn't be that level of discrimination, and so that's the overall pitch that we need. In terms of skills, yes, one of the things I think we need to work on is, and why I hate the gig economy. Go back to my father's generation, that's what you got a job and you were trained in that job and you progressed in that career. The gig economy, where it's like, oh, you can have this and do a bit of sort of 0 hours contract, there is no skills training in that. There is no long-term commitment to the person you're employing. People just never progress, never have a chance to progress. So I think the key thing we want to do is clamping down on because workers' more rights and apprenticeships. And I've used up all my time.
On the question about black caps, no, they shouldn't be exempt, but we may need to manage that change carefully and with all due respect. On the matter of transgender rights, I feel as though I am the best friend of the trans person. And let me explain why. And I understand there is some controversy and conflict even in the Green Party, and I'm very surprised to hear Sean refer to something in my leaflet, so I'll read it and see what the problem is, or could possibly be. Let's continue to meet with women's groups concerned about the impact of the Gender Recognition Act, and LGBTIQA plus campaigners too. And for sure I want to be able to hold those meetings in City Hall. And it should not be an act of heresy to wish to meet with women, 50% of the population, to hear their concerns. And I understand that doing so might be deemed to be controversial. But politics is about negotiation. Politics is about listening and hearing people who may have controversial views. And if women feel threatened, or if they feel that their same-sex spaces are under threat, then we need to understand their concerns, all the better to deal with them. So I'm sorry, I'm in politics to listen to people and then engage, not to tell them what's in their interest, including women. On the matter of, what was the final two? Oh, anti-Semitism. I think we need to be careful, because anti-Semitism is defined as hatred towards Jews, and I think we can accept that, despite the fact that the etymology may suggest a bit of a broader definition. But the important thing is that Greens are against discrimination and hatred in all its forms, from whatever source. So in that sense, I do not distinguish between forms of discrimination. And that's why you'll see me out on a regular basis, campaigning outside Whitehall against fascists, against Tommy Robinson, against the rising xenophobia in London. And we need to combat that. And I hope I will be the voice of the Green Party in that. And finally,
skills in 5 seconds.
Skills.
I'm in favour.
Imperative that we make sure that we combat the exploitation of young people in apprenticeships which should be paid for.
Okay, and Zach, over to you.
Thank you. On black caps, this one's complicated because the black caps have a huge lobby, as we all know. So I can see both sides of the argument. If I'm honest though, I tend towards the fact that I don't think they should be exempt. I think there's some emergency vehicles and things like that still have to pay charges and various things. I just don't think it's right that black caps get that extra kind of responsibility. They often use the argument, we're a tradition, we've been going for years, we can be killing us. Not literally, but the trade. And I think that actually we have to evolve, we have to move, we have to find green jobs. I madly disagree with Sean. I love it when they block Tottenham Court Road, because actually it shows you what a city car-free street would look like. I live just nearby and I love the fact that it's clear and fresh. On trans rights, my good friend Peter Tatchell, who is a Green Party member and has been very strong in the human rights movement and civil rights movement for a long time, I had a chat with him about this a couple of months ago, because I was really caught up with respecting women and making sure I'm listening to women, but also wanting to stand with my trans sisters and brothers and thinking it's not my place as a man to get into that argument. He said politely, that's bollocks there. Sometimes it's about solidarity, and actually I entirely agree. So let me be very clear and very solid on this. I stand with my trans sisters and brothers. That doesn't mean we don't listen to women. It doesn't mean that we don't have conversations with people. But I think it's important that we recognise that hate crime is on the rise. Trans people feel threatened by their very existence. The Gender Recognition Act has nothing to do with their existence, but certain anti-trans campaigners are turning it into a conversation about that. We can't allow ourselves to fuel that conversation and to give it any credence. So let's listen to women, but let's also make sure that we're protecting our trans sisters and brothers. And finally, on jobs. I madly disagree with Peter, although I don't think it's what I meant, because he's brilliant. The gig economy is something I love, and I think we need to be careful to protect it. I did my tax return the other day, I was quite late on it. I realised I have about 16 jobs. I work as an actor, a therapist, a trainer, I work as a consultant, so I'm doing lots of different jobs all the time, and I appreciate the versatility of me as a human being, and how I can manage my time to do things like campaign. I also recognise that not everyone has that privilege. And for some people, 0 hours contracts in the gig economy are used to exploit them. So I think it's somewhere in between the two of those, and it's a way of managing that so people have the choice and flexibility, but they don't feel that they're forced to do it. I work in a school, arts educational, it's a university in Turnham Green. I'm a guidance counsellor there, so I talk to young people about the futures almost every day. When I started there, they used to talk about mental health issues that I recognise as being something more you'd go and see a therapist or a psychiatrist for. But actually, London is so out of control at the moment that frequently they talk to me about worries about housing, their worries about the planet, their worries about Brexit. These aren't even really mental health issues, they're causing mental health issues. But these are legislative policy issues. They're not things that need to happen, they're not inevitable, they have political solutions. And as Greens, we should be at the forefront of pushing for that.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much to all our candidates for answering the questions that some of which came in online, some from people in the room here. Give them a moment just to gather their thoughts, because I think we should now be moving to the final statements. And for the final statements, would it be, well, what would it be in the next order? In fact, in reverse order. So, yeah, I've got Zach, Peter, Shara, Shan. I'm not sure if that's should be going that way. Sorry, I'm confused with Walthamstow here at this point. So yeah, we come back down the line. So that's where we're up to. And what we asked our candidates to do is to take 3 minutes to tell us, okay, having answered the questions, done the initial pitch, what else do they want to tell us now in this sort of final 3 minutes of this session to say, yeah, I'm your candidate. Vote for me.
Is this an election?
You choose to do it with, for those, easier if everybody just does it electing for you. Yeah? Yeah.
Cool. I will steal your phrase, vote for me as well, trade opportunity.
I don't think it's original.
And this is 3 minutes, right? Yeah. Fantastic. So to begin again at my story at the beginning about not preparing what you're going to say to people, I haven't prepared what I was going to say in this closing speech because I wanted to hear the conversation that we had first. And I'm confident I can speak authentically from the heart and reflect on some of the things that have been said. The first obvious thing to say is thank you to my fellow candidates and thank you to you guys. I think it's been an informed debate, and I think the quality of discussion, without attacking other parties, although that's always fun, has been a level above other parties. I feel like we've gone into some quite deep issues in a fairly unsuperficial way. I think the thing that's missing from this debate, and it's often missing from debates when I reflect on it, is the people who are missing from this room, or largely missing from this room. I mentioned homeless people, but I'm also talking about refugees. I'm talking about people who are disabled in London. I'm talking about trans people in London who are visibly trans, who I don't know about in this room. I'm talking about people who often feel voiceless, or even if they're not voiceless because they're incredibly capable people who aren't represented. Now, traditional kind of political ideology would go, they're not the people to talk about in the closing speech because they're not the people who are going to vote for it right now. But I know that every single one of us as Greens doesn't think like that. We actually think about what's the right thing to do. What's the right time to use this time for, to speak about and represent. As your mayoral candidate for the Green Party, I would absolutely represent those people. I would advocate for them by speaking to them, by listening to them, by already having my own opinions and those strong opinions held held strongly. And also being willing to listen, being willing to be flexible, being willing to change opinions or take on new opinions with new ideas if the facts were different. And I think right now, London is an incredible city. It has an incredible amount of opportunity. I've just spoken on a personal level how much I love the city, how much I love my friends, how much I love entertainment and culture, the way I can get around on my bike. I'm vegan. It's never been a better time to be vegan in this city right now. But in this city, it is too hard every single day for far too many people. I'm talking about people with mold on their walls. I'm talking about people who can't afford the bus fare to work. I'm talking about people who are in split family relationships because Brexit has become too much of a hot issue and it's driving the family apart. I'm talking about people who experience racism, transphobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, whatever it might be, every single day. Those are the people I will stand up for. I'm asking for your vote to give me that platform to be able to stand up for them. One thing we've not spoken about today, and Caroline and Sean have done beautifully, is the fact that the London Assembly doesn't give you an incredible amount of power. It gives the mayor an incredible amount of power, but actually the Assembly members don't have a lot of hard power. They can only vote down the budget, which would cause chaos, and that's power, but generally day to day, it's a lot more about holding people accountable. They do have an incredible amount of soft power there. And what I mean by that is the ability to go to the media or talk to citizens and say, as your London Assembly member, this is what I'm standing for. And I'm telling you, as your London Assembly member, I'm standing for trans people. I'm standing to prevent all HIV infections in London and across the UK. I'm standing to make sure that we prevent anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. I'm standing to make sure we have a proper transport policy, that cyclists can get around the city properly, that we can breathe clean air, that we can make sure that we're saving the planet. I'm standing for a lot of things, and that's why I'm asking you to vote for me. Thank you.
I don't know whether you had a chance to see my leaflet.
Yes, I have.
Save the paper there, which I very much applaud. Stand up and step up to the plate. Well, I found that a very interesting, engaging for engaging in those questions. And I'd like to start by pointing out a few differences even amongst the candidates, because I think that's quite helpful, or how I see them. So, I have produced some leaflets. You talked about power, which I think is a concept. And I would say that one of the main vehicles in politics is voice. You may wish to call influential ways of leading and shaping a society, including in garnering people's votes in an election. And as I've said, I've stood before as an Assembly candidate, I've stepped in for mayoral candidates, including Sean, and spoken in the campaign, and I would be able to do that for you again. And I want us to be unashamed about what our challenge is, not just for the current generation, but for future generations, and for other than human species as well. He is a fantastic personality, and it's something that we don't think about. Eclectic in some ways, we are liberal, we are libertarian, and we think outside the box. And we're bold in that way. Absolutely, we're social. Climate justice is more than anything an egalitarian issue. And with Sean, I think I would actually have greater capacity. And I don't think we should be putting all our eggs in one basket, no matter how good that egg or that basket is. If I were a co-leader, I help magnify the voice of London. So I think also in terms of capacity, I wouldn't face any potential party. I will be able to dedicate myself as your things which I think shape what the Green Party is. And I would be truly honoured to serve as your mayoral candidate. And I want us not to lose sight of the fact that this is last chance saloon. It's very hard for us, our contemporaries, really to get our head around how big our responsibility is. And people understandably shy away from that. It's too difficult, it's too hard. They have the bread and butter issues that they have to deal with. And we do connect all those things up, not just in policy, not just in an abstract way, but in a very practical way. Whether it's Darren and Jenny's campaigning on the London living wage, or in this case, I want at the heart of our campaign, at the front and the centre of our campaign, to be not about looking after number one, but about looking after the planet. Thank you.
myself. As I said, I'm not a fan of personality politics. I see myself as a representative of the Green Party. So what can I offer as your representative? As I talked about the key things of green politics, compassionate and cooperative. That's the way I work. I care about people. I really care about the green issues. And I believe we work things happen to achieve the change, to bring people in. It's that inclusive nature. I can only speak from my experience, from my knowledge, from what I know. London is 8 million people. That's 8 million different experiences, voices. It's about bringing those together. We're going to be standing, we'll have the mayoral candidate, we will also have our list of candidates. And as I said, when we have the list Hustings, we have a fantastically, wonderfully diverse group of candidates there to represent our wonderfully diverse city. And it's using that whole group of people, not just as enables people to speak for themselves about what they want. So that's the empowering. Giving people voices, empowering other people to speak. And so for me, as an anti-mayor, in that sense, it's about not getting power for me. My whole campaign would be about making sure that power goes back to Londoners. And as I said, we're afflicted with bad politicians. And for me, the key message for this election should be, if you vote for the same old parties, you will get the same old politics. If you want something better, vote Green. And it's to us to show that we are better than that we are a party that wants to be in power. We shouldn't be talking about being the third party in London. We should be talking about how fantastic it would be if we were the first party in London. How brilliant it would be if we had a Green mayor. How fantastic it would be if we had that assembly full of Green members to show what that Green vision is and how that includes everybody and brings everybody together. And for me, that's the key part of our campaign. We each have different characteristics. It's about who you think can best represent you and who you think will appeal to the wider public and bring more votes in for the Green Party so we do get those Green Party members elected. That's your choice. I'll leave it up to you.
Well, thank you very much. Like everyone said, that's been quite it's quite a mature debate we've been having, and I've really enjoyed it. I've taken on board the important point from Peter that we should be more holistic, more green with our Zach, how to be more engaging, which he's amazing at. From Shara, bold, talk about some of the existential stuff. I think that's really important. I think we've also taken on board, and me and Caroline already work this way, but how important it is to bring other voices into our campaigning, to listen and put the policies forward that come from the most marginalised people. People like the hidden homeless, people like those living in social housing, migrant women and students who we meet as well, the least secure workers that Caroline works on behalf of young people and black people, and young black people in particular. When it comes to being denied opportunities, they are treated unbelievably badly. I think I talked in my first part of the debate about what a perfect green storm we have. And we do, and every part of it is needed if we're going to do what we can in the next election. This is our amazing record, going right back 20 years. It is the weakness. It is finding the right candidate, the one who can show that they've been working as the shadow mayor, as I have, but also who has the time and effort to put in. And I do have that because I already work all day on those issues. I'm already full-time as your mayoral candidate already, so there's plenty that I can still do. But the most important thing is that we need the right team and the right organisation right through the party. And I said at the beginning, I've never seen such a brilliant group of candidates for the Assembly, and I'm confident that we'll have that. But also, I've never seen a party whose local parties are so well organised and for which there's already a plan in place for how to reach Londoners with a year to go. So I'm really excited about this. I think London's more than ready for a Green mayor. It's more than ready for a woman mayor, to be honest. And I think we need to have the Green woman with the party behind her that has the good ideas that London needs to solve its problems as our mayoral candidate for next year. Other parties do take up our ideas in the end. We're very good at making them do that, but it always takes far too long. Why should London wait? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to all 4 of our candidates this afternoon for coming, for making their pitches, for answering questions from people here, from people at home. I mentioned earlier, to thank early to get people signed in. Of course, one of the things that this campaign is going to need, apart from the great candidates, the real enthusiasm and the brilliant policies that we have, will also be money. So I do hope people are thinking about that as well. But I want at this point to ask Phil just to say a few words here. Phil is organising the actual internal elections on this, to say something about what people now do if they have further questions for candidates, and what the voting process is, not how people should vote, what the voting process is, the deadlines, etc. So, if you could say a word or two about that, Phil, and maybe if you could say it from the lectern, so that again, we've got your every word there.
Right, hi everyone, thank you everyone for coming. I think it's been a really good, sorry my throat's on the way out, really good atmosphere in the room. Really thank you so much to all the candidates, and I'll thank you a little later. So, if you've still got questions, you can, kind of every single candidate in both the mayor and the list, on the main ballot website, which I'll give out in a second, they have a contact email address, some of them have websites. Everyone has Twitter, I believe. So yeah, check them out and you can email them directly. If you'd like to ask a question from the room, you've got bits of paper which I can gather in afterwards, and I'll email the candidates. And you can also email me if you'd like to, if you're online. It's phil.vabulas@gmail.com. That's phil.vabulas@gmail.com. To vote, most of you are going to be online voters. The website to vote is ballot.greenparty.org.uk, and you'll use the little button in the top left-hand side that says Members Site Login. It's a bit long-winded, you've got to go through a few steps once you've done that, but kind of you should be able to, if you have any issues with that, contact me again, phil.fabulous@email.com. A few of you might have postal votes. If your member site login doesn't work, that might be the reason. Again, contact me if you haven't received your postal vote, but do it quickly because the voting will close. Voting closes 14th of February. You will receive an email on the 15th of February announcing all of the winners and thanking everyone. So yeah, first, thank you very much everyone here for coming. Thank you for viewing online. Thank you to the candidates, and thank you so much to Jean for being amazing today.
A vote of thanks to Phil. He's been absolutely phenomenal, because you can't please all the people all the time, let alone 22 Green candidates, some of whom are Mayoral candidates. He's been at it all hours over Christmas, and he's been absolutely phenomenal.
I've been asked also to make one last which is something I think close to the hearts of Greens in London, which is Ella's legal case, which is going to the High Court, but is still short of money. The crowdjustice.com site /case/air pollution so far raised £18,171, but there are only 7 days left to raise the remaining 6,829. This is a really important case. So anybody that has the money, the motivation, please join that. As I said again, it's the Crowd Justice site, www.crowdjustice.com/case/air pollution, because that case is really important to us as well as Greens and indeed